And we're also worried about and how they will be taking on the fines. So I think that's part of what we'll be talking about. Thank you.
Morning, I'm Ernst from Perkins, Eastman Architects. We, depending on the month, are one of the two largest firms in New York City, about 500 people in New York, and as many more scattered around the world. I'm one of the leaders in our commercial mixed use practice area group, which focuses mostly on multifamily, office, retail, and basically any building that has more than one use that's being built by it. So the issues that we're seeing now and the economics of all of that are central to all of our countries.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Lynn, one of the mechanical partners at JB&B. I run our residential and hospitality practice. Sorry, thank you. JB&B, we're MEP engineers. We design all the systems that go into the buildings that use all this energy. So we're obviously at the heart of a lot of the solutions here.
Morning, I'm Rob Willis. I'm the head of construction for MAG Partners, for real estate developers here in New York City. Our company is led by Mary and Bill Martin, a graduate of Fordham. And we are currently working on 3 residential projects in New York. One will turn over next spring, and then 2 others are in design. And then we're also working on a large mixed-use project in Baltimore that's entitled for 14 million square feet that has some district energy opportunities.
Great. Well, thank you very much for those introductions. Clearly, the mix of expertise that we have here on the panel this morning is certainly going to produce some very interesting discussion and very valuable as well. Let me start by just saying a few words about where we stand right now. So according to the Urban Green Council, here in New York City, buildings are the source of nearly 70% of carbon emissions, 95% of electricity consumption, and 80% of water consumption. And with the ongoing climate concerns that we have, not just in New York City, but in the world at large, it's no surprise that New York City has passed into law certain local laws, not the least of which is Local Law 97. Local Law 97 requires large buildings to cut emissions by 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. Those are obviously highly ambitious goals, and when coupled with a number of other local laws that have either been passed or that are in the process of being passed, it's no question that the discussion about sustainability and Local Law 97 specifically is extremely timely. So with that as a backdrop, what I'd like to do is first focus on the idea of the viability of implementing Local Law 97 to start with. And I'd like to start with Rob at the end, and maybe we could work over this way towards me and talk a little bit about the initiatives that, or the viability, your thoughts about how that is going to be implemented. It's a bold goal, and how we're going to do it.
So we're currently in design on 2 projects, both of which are about 200,000 square feet, nominally 200 units each. And last March, when it became apparent that Local Law 97 was going to change the way people are building in New York, we pivoted and with the help of JBB, decided to go all electric on both of those. There are economic pressures, and there's some tension there in terms of cost. It's not at no cost, but we made a decision that instead of moving ahead with the conventionally designed building with cooling towers and boilers, that it was time to pivot and I'm sure that we don't deliver a building that in 5 years is going to be obsolete.
I think from the two projects that we're on together, you know, those solutions were really kind of newish, right? For this particular, these particular types of buildings. A lot of developers like to just, hey, you know what, we know what's tried and true, let's go with the cooling tower, let's go with the boiler. And I think, Chris, you probably experienced this as well. It felt like end of last year, beginning of this year, a light switch went off. Everybody was starting to look at and really seriously consider electrification in this way. Some of the solutions are significantly more complicated, requiring more sophisticated operators, you know, to operate these buildings.
I'd also add that there's not one solution for every project. So one of the projects is relatively high rise, 22 stories, and the other is shorter, has a larger footprint. And JBB studied both approaches, and there's one solution that's less expensive, but it's not feasible for the high rise. So there are different approaches, and I think, you know, this is just going to continue to grow in terms of the number of vendors that are coming into the market in order to you know, provide the equipment, and hopefully the pricing will come down as that competition fills the void here.
Yeah, it seems like you said in the last year or so, the light switch is finally gone. I remember back in 2019, we were mid-design on projects that were just about to be filed, and local law 7 was passed, and everyone had to scramble to figure out what they were going to do. You know, it's an emissions reduction, so everyone knew intuitively you have to stop burning stuff. So you know, the fuel oil, natural gas in question, but also at the same time, electricity is not an energy source; it's a transmission medium. So where it's coming from matters. And at the time, and actually it's probably gotten worse since then, where a lot of energy is coming from, in particular clean. So there was a lot of confusion as to how the various targets over the course of time would be met, and how the utility in companies and the available energy sources would evolve. But it took about 2 years before everyone, I think, came to the conclusion that the only real viable way is to go to fully electrified systems. Obviously, it helps if the building is more efficient. So we've been trying to design more and more efficient envelopes to design buildings that use less of that energy, no matter where it's coming from. Other laws have been helping with that. The New York City Energy Construction Code is pretty aggressive to begin with as far as things are concerned. So if you're already doing that, you're probably in a pretty good position in terms of energy consumption. But really, the hard part of it all falls on the mechanical engineer. And we just have to. But it's forced us to sort of reevaluate space allocation ordinance to deal with different construction.
Yeah, I think the starting point is the ultra efficient envelope, minimize the amount of energy that we are losing or gaining through the envelope, then the most efficient way to deal with that.
I think that's why through the work that we're doing with landlords who are retrofitting, it's great that you have something new, but when you're retrofitting, it's a lot more difficult to figure out how to get to a point where you're not, you know, there's not as much waste. I think that for a while we saw LEED kind of falling off the map. And people were not following it. People didn't want to put the money into it. But we're seeing now that a lot of the clients that we're working with are going back to trying to build with a lead, not so much just to do the sustainable end of it, because they're finding that that's helping them with just getting to a point where they're not wasting as much. There's more recycling going on. So, to the point of the New York Times article. So a little bit more recycling, a little bit more accountability to everyone who's working on it. So I think that everybody's got to come up to speed. And with local law 97, they pushed it out from 2025 to 2030 because they saw that so many people were not going to make it for 2025. So the fines, are rather hefty, and we see in leases that the tenants are, taking on some of that burden of that fine. So we're trying to help the tenants to use less so that they have less of a proportion of fine coming in 2030.
Very interesting points. Rob talked a little bit about the concept of obsolescence, and that's obviously an extremely key point when it comes to real estate development. And frankly, when we really look at it, New York City especially, but many cities across the country and across the world are in a constant state of development and redevelopment. Local law of 97 and some of the other climate-oriented laws are pushing that forward a little bit, but there is a cost associated with obsolescence, and certainly, Francis, you mentioned the fines, the penalties for not complying. In the past, there have been other local laws that have been aimed at, not laws or that have been laws or proposals that have been aimed at penalizing owners for consuming too much energy or producing too much greenhouse gas emissions, but they haven't had quite the impact of the fines that I think local law 97. Can all of you, starting with Francis, talk a little bit more about the fines, what they mean for not only landlords but tenants, and just go into that a little bit more, because where the idea of reducing greenhouse gas emissions is the carrot, the fines are the stick.
Yeah, so most of the other laws that have come along, so as you were saying, the electric, we've all started to design all of our electric within the offices. I know some people don't like it. You walk out of your office, lights go out, or you're sitting in your office and you have to wave your hand so the lights go back on. Those did not have fines to it, but those were picked up during your DOB review of your drawings. Now, with because so many buildings, this is kind of in a way for the city to make some money also, because the fines are steep. There's the first set of fines is not as steep as the second set of fines. So I think that people are trying to make it through to the first set and to see how bad it's going to be and what their buildings, it's all based on the size of the building, what kind of equipment you have in the building, how much you're using of gas, electric, and all of that. So I think when you put that all together, but it is the stick that's trying to make everybody kind of go back and reassess where they are, where they should be going to, and trying to, for New York City, clean it up, because you don't want all that in the air. And there's other options to it too. There's the fields in the ocean, with the wind, to try and get wind power, and you get credits for all of that. And the city is trying now to give you credits for what you do against the fines that you would be. So there is a balance, and there's people coming out of the woodwork who will help you with that balance.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing about the fines, and it's the architect, have to pay them. It's gonna start going into contracts.
Give them any ideas, yes.
But the hardest thing about it is that local law 97, unlike other building codes, which are prescriptive, it just says, you do this and you've complied with the law. Whereas local law 97, the targets are evolving, and you're limited to the energy that you can get. and you don't necessarily have any control over how green it is, whether that electricity is coming from burning coal. So it makes it hard for us as designers to say, if you do this, you'll be fine. Because the way the language of the law is written, it kind of evolves over time, and we know that the energy industry is evolving. So it's not, it's definitely a difficult thing to design for. So what we have to do, it seems, is just sort of make our best guess, assume that it's got to be electric because it's the only thing that can be, and fully conventional.
Also, that's a great point, Chris, because you're absolutely right. Everything, local and stuff does evolve over time. And on Rob's projects here, he took on a feasibility study on what the solutions are, and we've done this for many projects at this point, like 50+ projects, where we're able to, in a predictive energy model, kind of build a building, try out different systems, see what the differences are, and predict. Now, because the emissions levels limits change, and some of them are not defined yet.
It's a prediction.
It's a prediction.
It's not a compliance with do this today, and I'm good.
Correct. And we're able to provide a rough range, our best guess today. The other thing I want to hit on here, Serge, your point about the funds. Through these energy studies, local 97 carbon reduction studies that we've done all over the city here, what we're finding is that yes, the fine is significant. However, in the overall scheme of the operating cost of a building for a single year, it's about somewhere between 2 and 5%. The majority of the operating cost is the energy cost, right? The utility cost. So if you're able to ratchet everything down, not only do you decrease the fine, but you decrease the overall operating cost.
You're saving money to save money.
Correct. So it's you're getting a double whammy. So
in addition to the fines, I think it's worth thinking about and talking about on the demand side. I think the consumers, particularly younger consumers, are going to demand buildings that are sustainable and are more interested perhaps than others in decarbonization. And then also on the investment side, investors are going to start demanding it as well. You can already see ESG mandates and requirements, and they'll be talking about this later. There's a whole industry around sustainable investment.
Yeah, excellent point. And those points only speak to the idea that the capital portion of sustainability can be extracted from the physical operation of the building, reducing operating costs through more efficient energy systems, not the least of which is the building envelope, but also the mechanical systems themselves. But speaking to a little bit more of the softer side of it, which is what kind of demand are we attracting, which I think that in and of itself is certainly something that makes the building more competitive, is the idea that the tenants that are going to occupy these now more, I should say, more efficient or more climate friendly types of buildings and spaces are certainly providing a different type of demand. Can we talk just a little bit about the sort of relationship between the idea of, let's just focus on office buildings for the moment, and how COVID has impacted tenanting, but also what type of opportunities have you seen in some of your projects where landlords might have made the decision to take that opportunity to retrofit a building because of their, because of the changing nature of the demand out there, not the least of which is due to COVID, but whether you believe COVID is over or not, work patterns in offices have certainly changed, at least temporarily and most likely permanently, which none of us can really predict. But I think that the idea of how people, workers, employees, are occupying office space is certainly a part of this. Does anybody have any thoughts on, that sort of relationship between how the tenanting is going to play out and how the sort of new mechanical systems and building envelopes are going to play into that?
I think start with just saying that, everybody's heard the flight to quality. So everybody wants to go to, if they're moving, they want to go to a building that has amenities or has something that they have to offer. A lot of those things are sustainable. They're looking for, green buildings, more green buildings, something that has a roof deck, something that offers, a communal place to gather so that there's not so many pantries throughout the building, so that there's not kitchens throughout the building. So that, and I think that has been driven by COVID, because I think that people who are coming back want more. They've learned a little bit about a balance. I don't know. Sometimes when I hear my phone going off at 11:45 at night, I think somebody forgot that we were supposed somebody forgot that we were supposed to be taking a better balance of our lives. But it seems to have gone away way too quickly. But I think that especially, the young people, you hear so many people, we're working with tenants who thought everybody's going to come back 5 days a week. Well, they're not come back 5 days a week. You're going to make them come back. They're going to find another job that they can have a better balance with. So I think that bringing them to a place where they're giving them a better balance of how they feel about their lives, I think is a big push. And I think that all has to do with sustainability. And they're looking for the better climate, the better place to work.
Yeah, it's sort of a different definition of sustainability than a lot of people use when they think of sustainability. They think of environmentalism, but sustainability is also health and wellness,
Yeah.
I think. And I do think that the sort of amenities arms race that really had already begun before the pandemic, sort of hospitality making of office space has only been accelerated, and it's how people seem to be staging themselves in the office. Increasingly seems is going to be a place to meet, not just a place to sort of put your head down and get work done. I don't know about all of you, but I have those days where I was supposed to go into the office, but I want to stay home so I can get some stuff done and not be distracted. Doesn't work, but also, a lot of people have already leases, and I think we're going to see it unfold in terms of how they expire when people renew their leases and go someplace else. But we're definitely seeing a lot in our development for new buildings. We're seeing a lot more focus on outdoor space. Is a very big thing. We used to never have balconies in office buildings. Terraces in office buildings. If you had a setback on an office building, it was just gravel there. No one was supposed to go out there, and now it adds to the rent. So, and I think that I don't know if you consider that environmentalism, but it's definitely an appreciation of the environment, and it's about improving and health, wellness at the same time.
I think many of the landlords that we're working with that are redeveloping older buildings, like say in the Farming District, they are trying to take a piece of it and say, let's use a piece of that for a terrace, or can we even do a roof deck, or how do we redevelop? It's kind of like that, the whole, I know it's the Penn 2 district, the Penn district, and how that's being redeveloped, and how they're trying to bring people in, but use common amenities. So that, and I think that everybody wants an amenity in their building. So now when we're out looking at buildings, for the tenants, it is a big thing to look at what does the building have to offer and how do they offer it.
Yeah, it's sort of a WeWork effect. I call it. We did Doc 72 for Boston properties. Part of that building had to do with its location. It needed to basically be a city unto itself because it's location on the Navy Yard. But you build an office building today, and it has to have all the things that you would have had in a hotel or a luxury condo 10 years ago. It has to have a food hall, it has to have a gym, it has to have a conference center, it has to have a lounge. So it's definitely, it's changed. The character of work has changed. People don't want to sit under fluorescent lights in the cubicle when they go to work. They want to have plants and have coffee, and they want to have beanbag chair, something, comfy furniture, and they want it to feel like a lounge. It's interesting. I don't know. And what that does,
We're absolutely seeing the same thing. Obviously, the indoor amenities, relatively easy to deal with. The outdoor, the rooftop, the terrace, spaces that came about, kind of at the beginning of COVID, and as a real perk, real necessity, really, during COVID, has major challenges for us, right? Because with local law 97 and electrification, basically electrification means heating with electric, not electric resistance, but in an efficient way. We're putting major pieces of mechanical equipment that's air cooled, that needs to sit out on a roof. So, and it takes up a lot more space than cooling towers. So now we're diametrically opposed. We're fighting for the roof, always fighting for the roof, which is, as you said, Chris, in the past, setback roof and setback roof, right? And oftentimes we land in mechanical equipment there. So that's a bit of a struggle there for us. But usually we come up with some good solutions that it's a little bit of compromise for everybody, but works out in the end. The other thing that we're seeing, as back to Serge's initial question about what's happening as a result of COVID, we're seeing a lot of our clients on the commercial office side taking advantage of downtime, upgrades, and very specifically looking at indoor air quality. Obviously, exploring lots of different things and really falling back to particular filtration is a tried and true solution for most people.
We used to hear that in the beginning of COVID, with everybody change out their filters, upgrade your filters. You don't hear that as much anymore because now all the systems are being upgraded based on trying to not just the filters, the entire system for better indoor air quality. Kept you busy.
Yes.
I would echo the comment about flight to quality, and we're looking at a feasibility of a boutique office building downtown, and if we were to go ahead with that, would likely be a very high quality kind of jewel box.
Lots of terraces.
Exactly, terraces and sustainable systems that we could use to attract a tenant. And they are downsizing, but they're moving, and when they move, they're looking for that new shiny gem of the building.
That's obviously a very nuanced point. The point about how tenants are using the building, the sort of health and wellness factor that Chris pointed out, which is really a very it's kind of hard to quantify, right? It's more of a qualifying factor, just highlighting the idea that the whole concept of sustainability is not relegated to just the quantifying greenhouse gas emissions or energy consumption. It's a much more holistic concept, and idea, from designing systems through the way the tenants are experiencing the building, all the way through to the financing and the operating costs and metrics of how the building works. One thing that kind of makes me, a topic that it makes me think of is the idea that one thing that you said, Rob, in the beginning is that you kind of pivoted at one point. Do you anticipate that building owners are going to, just from what you're seeing, right, in the current state that we're in, as time goes on, as you said, that it's not exactly the kind of program where here's a goal, you meet it, you're good. It's more of a moving target. Do you think that there'll be a strict division in the market among landlords where some are going to take the position of, we don't know what this goal is going to be, so let's leapfrog ahead and make sure that we're doing as much as we can because we want to build as much value into this building as we can, that thought pattern versus let's wait for the cost to come down, let's see what the penalties end up being, and let's see what our options are, because it's really not that easy to just retrofit every building, right? There are tenants in place, and there is equipment in place, and so the idea of just saying, well, let's just retrofit it is not as easy as it sounds. And so while there are many success stories where there were the opportunity to do so, maybe let's talk about the opportunities where it's not quite as easy to do that right now, and how some of those landlords can, what they need to do to sort of catch up to the program.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. And I think that, our position or our view is that we need to leapfrog it. The decarbonization trend is not going away. I think we're at a pivot point where it's only starting to accelerate. The writing, whether my colleagues here agree with that, but I think in the last call it 6 months here, there's a sea change, and that if you kind of wait and see, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, the legislation is picking up, not just here in New York. It's Boston and California, of course, and lots of other cities are also starting to implement these kinds of legislation measures for the exact same reason.
Yeah, and it's not just the building, actually, electric cars in California, New York, it's touching everything. So I don't see a path backwards.
The other piece that we haven't talked about is Inflation Reduction Act. And
It's very good.
we haven't even really, I don't think very few people yet even understand everything that's in there. And I'm getting emails from vendors saying that you can now get tax credits for certain products.
I have a project in design development right now where the developer is looking at dynamic glazing because of the credits which are available for them, which is something. It's great. They're doing the right thing. They're getting the credit for it. So that's the flip side of. There's legislation that's forcing you to do things, but there are opportunities for people, and that's a great example. They're still running the numbers. We're waiting to see if it shakes out. But, I've been looking at dynamic glazing for 10 years. It always comes up. It's really cool if we can do this. And then it's happened. And now all of a sudden, when I first heard they were talking about doing dynamic glazing, I thought, we'll do something kind of signature spaces, maybe with amenity, maybe the lines. You want to know the whole building, and we're going to hook it up to the building's BMS system, and it's going to have a monitor on the roof, and it's going to be like the sunglasses that change and go in and out, and it's going to dynamically adjust depending on the lighting conditions. Tenants will have the opportunity to override it. If it's anything like the programmable LED bulbs that I've got a year and a half, you'll play with them for like 6 months or 6 days. And then eventually you'll just sort of let them go like autopilot and just sort of turn off and on again. But you're absolutely right. I don't think everyone's really figured out all of the opportunities that are there, but that's a very key thing. Is that there's free money.
But I was just gonna say, you are talking about though, people who have money to do the upgrade. When you sometimes think about, and I know when local law 97 first came out, the whole, review of the buildings in New York showed that many of the buildings that are the worst are the ones that are apartment buildings, small scale apartment buildings. Those people don't really have the money to do the dynamic glazing, or it isn't the opportunity to do the dynamic glazing. And those are the people that I think that there's a balance that has to be struck with how they're going to be fined because they're a smaller landlord. They own maybe one building. Well, how do they get fined as the same thing as a, 101 story, brand new building? So I think that that is something that they've been talking about. And it is, I think, a concern because it's great if you have the money to do it as a landlord, but if you don't have the money to do it, then you're not gonna be able to get the credits. You're not gonna be able to, do what you would like to do or you think you should do. And I think those are the people that are not leapfrogging ahead. I think those are the people that are waiting to see, what is going to happen.
Hopefully, the market will fill, the demand for this. We were talking earlier about how New York City Housing Authority and NYSERDA put together a program and challenged a number of different engineers and vendors to come up with a solution for heat pumps. They recently awarded like a $70 million project for a number of units, and the winner came up with something that was very interesting and innovative. So this demand for the sustainability should drive innovation.
Yeah, and it has already, as you just stated, Rob, right? I remember when local law 97 was in the intro stage, and we were all scrambling when we first heard this and looking at the different technologies, and there just wasn't an out-of-the-box technology that was available to deal with this for our climate here in the Northeast. And through our work with all of the vendors that we deal with, manufacturers that we deal with, including multinationals, we help to drive the manufacturers that come up with solutions, to bring the solutions that they have in Europe and in Asia here. It just really helped them understand the need that we had and the various performance values that we needed to accomplish for us here in New York. So it was kind of a big head scratcher for a while, and we were able to come up with some innovative solutions to help with some of the manufacturers.
All good points, and the idea of innovation and how innovation occurs, why and when it occurs. This is certainly an incredible time right now that we're in, not the least of which is the idea of technology, not just software technology, but hard technology like materials and mechanical systems. It's the relationship of where laws and the need to change an old way of doing something is leading to innovation. And that makes me think, we're here at 9:45 and we have maybe 5 or so more minutes before we'll get into a couple of questions. But I want to bring up one more topic that came to mind, particularly as Rob was talking about the idea of other programs, programs, not where it's a law that has penalties, but where there are incentives to do something. And those apparently from this discussion that that you're all talking about are all interrelated. And so there's the idea of doing nothing, right? Waiting and seeing, or to Francis' point, there are some landlords that simply just don't have the capital to do some of these renovations that are required. There are those that are doing the bare minimum to do what they believe is to comply. And then there's the concept of gaining a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And that idea of gaining a competitive advantage is what really, I think, drives innovation, certainly drives people to seek out new solutions to old daunting problems. So as I'm looking out here, I have the luxury of looking at everybody sitting here in the audience. And I see a wide mix of people that have been in the industry for a long time, and those that are just starting out, some of which are my own students here, which I'm really glad to see this morning. Thanks for coming. And that makes me think about the idea of many of us have had to get smart really quickly about what to do about some of these local laws. Well, what about the idea of building a skill set around the opportunities around climate change initiatives? And really maximizing the benefits of some of those incentives. And so what will the skill set of the future look like? What can people do now to prepare themselves to get smart really quickly about where they can find competitive advantages, being able to put together not only plans to pivot to comply with laws, which, as you've all said, more and more will be coming, but to jump ahead of that and build a skill set around figuring out how to combine all the incentives to really gain a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Not an easy question to answer. That's a tough one.
I mean, I would say that building performance is definitely becoming more of a metric of good design in my profession, in the architectural field. The AIA used to have a design award and a separate sustainability award, and a couple of years back, they realized those can't be separate things. If your buildings aren't performing well, they're really not good design at all, frankly. So I think in our industry, an understanding of building performance and the actual metrics of it and the post-occupancy evaluation is going to become more important. With the architect, in the past, I think has gotten one of saying, this is a great idea, it's going to be great. And it's sort of a subjective, qualitative thing that you sort of like, you put your feet and go to the building and, you know, every wish it luck. But I think going forward, we're going to have a lot more incentive and obligation to make sure that our buildings can continue to perform as advertised. And continue to
get graded on it now.
Well, that as you were just saying, we get graded on a curve that keeps changing.
Right.
But you know, so I think that that's definitely a trend that we're seeing. I don't know if it's, you know, I've been at school for too long to sort of really know how it's being taught. But the kids that I'm meeting coming out of school seem to have a much stronger sense of, you know, the analytics and the performance of those.
I mean, to your point about ongoing performance, you know, we design, we construct, we do initial commissioning, which has become more important than it used to be. But then we turn it over to property management, and they may or may not be measuring the performance going forward. And so maybe it's that retro commissioning process. Maybe there's, you know, if smart owners will review their performance on an annual or biannual basis, which I think only the best operators are doing that now.
I certainly think with the local instituted the letter grade, right, for the buildings on an annual basis is going to help push that. Right, but I do agree with you, Rob, that retro commission in particular is very important. We do a fair amount of it, and we do then see that we'll do the initial commissioning, we'll come back and do the retro commissioning, and we're looking at the settings in the reports, and we're saying like, it's the same building. Yeah. Right, we left it this way, you know, a year ago, and here we are, and it's completely different. Yeah.
I think it's all a learning curve. I think that as we progress and as we learn ourselves, I think the people who are coming, the younger people who are coming along will learn with us. But you know, sometimes I think they get to the next level. So they're the people who are, will depend on in the future to really be the ones that are responsible. And I think that it's true. I think that responsibility of, you can't just leave it, like you said, you build it, you leave it. You can't just build it and leave it. I think what we've learned during the building of it is something that you have to have everybody who's in the building, not only, property managers, because I think they're the most responsible, that they have to do the most. But I think that everybody, the tenants, everyone has to know that it's part of their responsibility. And I think that that's why landlords are making tenants responsible for their portion of the fine, whatever it is. Like if you're, if you have not upgraded to, efficiency, then you're a little bit more responsible than the other tenant who has designed efficiency. And I think that everybody's going to want to demand.
I also think though, too, right, with all of this, that evolving technology is going to come into play here. Where, a lot of us hear the term smart buildings, right? More technology, more sensors, more programming, building optimization, that type of technology is going to start to become more commonplace to, I won't say eliminate the need for retro commissioning, but it's an early indicator, fault detection type things where, hey, this piece of equipment is running a few amps higher than it was last month. Maybe we're gonna go and look at it. Or it'll alert you to the, oh, there was a complaint, we put it in hand, left it in hand, forgot about it. Hey, by the way, building operator, this piece of equipment was left in manual. Put it back on. That type of thing is gonna become more commonplace, I think.
All great points, and that's absolutely fascinating. From technology to the type of tenanting, what they're responsible for. It's clear we're in a big learning curve right now that it will persist for a while. So in the spirit of learning, maybe we can have a couple of questions. We've got about 5 minutes left.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for putting this presentation together and for panelists sharing your time and ideas. I think it's all very, very timely. It's just yesterday I took through the list that the DOB put out of all the buildings in the city that are now required to meet the emissions standard, and I held my breath. Thank God I wasn't on that list. I'm also a landlord, property owner. I have 2 properties. I was also yesterday in conversation with a representative from Con Edison about the heat pumps and how I can retrofit, I guess is the term, my buildings from oil to the new heat pump system, which Con Edison is in the process of putting together their program so you can get incentives and all kinds of little things. It's still in development. But one of the questions I asked Con Ed is, this heat pump with the electricity, whose account is this hooked up to? Is it my account, landlord who's responsible for building lights, or the individual tenants? But she replied, you can go to the tenants. Now here's a question I guess for Ms. Graham. When you speak about landlord tenants, are there any legalities? Because if I get this system in and I have each tenant now paying for their own heating and cooling, their electrical bill is going up. And I have a building mixed with market rate and rent stabilization. And so for rent stabilized, where I'm supposed to provide the heat, are there any legalities or legal issues that are all, how does the landlord and the legal and the local law, how does this all come into?
I don't really know. I don't do, I basically am in the commercial real estate portion, but I don't know if somebody else is doing the
I don't either, but we have talked about it. And the question is whether that becomes part of, a rent component. And, maybe the rent goes down because, you're no longer providing heat. But it's a tricky question that's a lot of people are going to be trying to figure out.
Okay.
So, hi, thank you.
Tim Oberwager from Commonwealth Title. First of all, thank you all. Great panel. Really enjoyed it. And you mentioned the work week and people coming back and the challenges there. One of the things I've been seeing is a lot of conversion or potential conversion to life sciences and biotech. Can you talk about if there's an opportunity to do both the retrofitting and the sustainability piece in conjunction with conversion to life science and biotech for office?
We are seeing some of that. We actually are seeing office buildings that were not old, where we just completed a building in the last couple of years where the developer is coming back to us and asking us, what would we have to do to get life science tenants? And it's the same stuff. It's improving indoor air quality. It's improving air changes. I don't know if you have had specifically whether that improves your sustainability, but it definitely question that we're getting asked to look at, and people are thinking very hard about it.
Yeah, Tim, we've done a tremendous amount of the conversions. Because you're just getting, better tenants, better rents, et cetera. And certainly on the sustainability side, yeah, it's a must, right? Although it's a slightly different type of building, you have a different metric that you're measured against. But all of it has to go in, all of it has to be considered. And, we're doing a lot of the really energy recovery, don't let a BTU escape kind of designs.
So do you think that people, because they're trying to attract life science tenants, are making the upgrades that they would need to have made for local law 97 sooner? That's what's pushing them.
What we're seeing is that, these existing buildings that want to attract the tenants need to upgrade anyway. So while they're upgrading,
Very interesting. All right, let's do one more question and then we're done with this portion of it. In the back.
I thank you again all for being here. My name is Colin Whalen, Fordham Masters in Real Estate Development. Something that Chris said got me thinking. We see a lot of the buildings close to here. The Hearst building, Bjork Engels Pyramid, LEED certified, purported as very sustainable. But Chris mentioned with the electrification process, whether it's a new build or especially if it's a retrofit or adaptive reuse, what say does the owner have and the engineers and architects working on the building as to where the energy is generated? I know we have offshore wind coming online years from now. We have other sustainable resources like nuclear going offline. What are you able to do? What resources does the city make available for actually generating green energy and sourcing that into the buildings?
I think right now, it's a precarious time where, to your point and to Chris's point earlier, the power that's coming into the Houston grid is with Indian Point going offline, it's getting worse. But the potential is that it's going to be all sustainable in by 2040, I want to say, was the commitment from the state. But there's still a lot of rulemaking that's still in the works right now to get that power from upstate, downstate to our particular zone.
The short answer is we don't have any.
Correct.
We don't have any.
No answer right.
We have no say in.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Serge, Chris, Rob, James, and Francis. Fascinating discussion.
1,000 more questions, and I'm sure we'll be continuing to talk about it. We're going to invite our next set of panelists to come up and take their seats, and while they're doing that, I will introduce our next set of panelists. We've heard about the stick and the carrot so far. We've heard about the stick of local law 97. We've heard about the carrot of what we think users want and what we think they're willing to pay for. But now the question is, where are we going to get the money? And how does that work? So that's what the next panel is about. What capital sources exist, and how do they approach this whole issue? So our second panelist is actually here for the second time. Melissa Reagen spoke last time. This event was held in person 3 years ago, back in 2019. And we're thrilled to have her back. She is with Nuveen, and her career has progressed since the last time we were here. She's now managing director and portfolio manager of Nuveen Real Estate, where she oversees all of the investment and portfolio allocation decisions for the U.S. Strategic Alternatives. Prior to her portfolio management role, she led Nuveen's team of research and strategy professional focused on the U.S. real estate market. Melissa graduated with a BA in economics from the University of Chicago and an MBA from the University of Chicago's Good School of Business with a concentration in finance, econometrics, and statistics. She's a counselor in real estate, I'm happy to say, and she's also a member of the Pension Real Estate Association's Research Committee and is a member of the Free Research Affinity Group. She's also an Urban Land Institute member and part of the ULI IRPC Green Council. She's previously served as co-chair of the NAPRE Research Committee, as well as the ICSC North American Research Task Force, NAPRE, and the National Multifamily Council. We are really excited to hear about all kinds of sources of capital this morning, whether it's more debt-like or whether more equity-like, and we are happy to have an amazing panel of speakers to address that topic for us. So please join me in welcoming Melissa Reagen and her.
Thank you. Microphone works, that's always good. Delighted to be here today as moderator of the panel. This is going to be a really exciting one. Some really great panelists. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. They have very distinguished backgrounds, but we do have Alexandra Cooley right here. She is the co-founder and CIO of Nuveen Green Capital, and that's a leader in C-based financing. And then we have Rajeev, and he's a partner at Climate for Capital. And then finally, at the end, we have Stephen Ceurvorst, and he's CEO and managing partner at LordCap and Lord Green. So with that, perhaps each of you could give your background, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So start with you, Alexandra.
Hi, everyone. As Melissa mentioned, I'm named Ali Cooley. I'm the co-founder and chief investment officer of Nuveen Green Capital. I actually got here because I got to this place by starting in the public sector. So after graduating from business school, I ended up working at the Connecticut Green Bank. Is anyone here familiar with Green Bank? Okay, not many. So I was essentially a state of Connecticut employee, and the Green Bank was to take small amounts of public capital and leverage that to bring private capital investment into the state into green projects. One of the first things I worked on was setting up a commercial property assessed clean energy financing program, or CPHD. Really fell in love with the product, saw that it could be very transformative for the commercial real estate space, reasons we'll get into later in the panel. So started a company with my co-founder in 2015 called Greenworks Funding, which was acquired by Nuveen in 2021. And then really what we built was the first nationwide CPHD lender. And so I'll get into how that can be helpful for the commercial real estate and integrating commercial real estate.
Hi, my name is Rajeev. I'm a co-founder of Climate for Capital. We're a real estate investment management firm And our strategy focuses on typically multifamily real estate in locations of low climate risk and high climate readiness that meet our sort of data-driven thresholds for those criteria. And then within those assets or in those assets, thinking about features of sustainability and resilience that make it more adept to thrive in a changing climate.
Good morning, I'm Steve Ceurvorst. I'm the CEO and founder of Lord Capital and founder of LordCap Green. We're a 20-year-old firm. I describe us as an ESG firm. Even though we're 20 years old, those letters didn't mean anything 20 years ago. Our Lord Capital business is having to do with consolidating assets that are securitized. It's driven by the G, governance. We've consolidated $88 billion of assets and still do that business. We also fell in love with the CPACE product, initially as investors, and then started to originate it ourselves. That is the E primarily, which is measurable. I know that there is a lot of mixed opinions in the world about ESG. I will tell you that in our CPACE world, whether you hate ESG or love ESG, we are in the middle and you can love us no matter which side of that argument you're on. We'll talk more about that later.
Wonderful, thank you very much. So I think to really kick it off, so for the audience and some background, depending on your kind of familiarity with CP's financing, I was going to ask Alexandra to kick it off and just kind of give us a history of CP's financing, how it came about, sort of how the demand has grown for it, over time. So that's the first question. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so a little bit of a history and students lesson for those of you who are not familiar with CP. So PACE is property as clean energy. It was actually started in 2008 by actually another public sector employee called Cisco Breeze, who ended up founding another residential PACE firm. And really he asked, we have this tool that's been in existence for centuries called a special assessment tool. So basically what that is, I don't know how many people here own real estate, your home or, okay, so often you'll find on your property tax bill, there'll be special assessments for things that, to raise money for things that benefit your property. Things like sidewalks, sewers, school districts, etc. And so Cisco had this idea, why can't we use that mechanism to raise capital to install clean energy measures on pieces of property, because it benefits property and it also benefits communities. So that was really the genesis of PACE. It was really a residential product to begin. So from 2008 to 2017, really when the first commercial PACE securitization happened, it was very much a residential PACE story. So really homeowners could access this financing to install things like solar energy efficiency on their properties. When I started at the Green Bank in 2012, we really saw this as a commercial play. And the reason that is because when you think about what commercial real estate is, which I'm sure you all know because you're all here in the theory panel, it's really diverse in terms of trying to standardize credit. So in order to access the most efficient long-term capital you need to install clean energy upgrade, you need standardization. And that just really doesn't exist in commercial real estate. Think about what commercial real estate is. Everything from a church to a strip mall to a building like this to a hospital. It's very, very difficult to standardize. And so if you think about CPACE as a very senior assessment on a piece of real property, you can kind of get rid of a lot of that noise, right? What you're really lending against is, will this property be in existence for my exposure, which tends to be very low, right? Because you're financing energy efficiency and solar. It's not like you're financing the whole building. Will this be in existence, be worth at least 20 to 30% of the existing value for 20 to 30 years? And so it really simplifies the equation for commercial real estate in a way that is uniquely valuable for that space. And when we started at the Green Bank, we really saw this as a transformative tool for the commercial real estate industry and set up the first successful commercial PACE program in the country. And in doing that, realized the capital markets weren't there either, right? Because in order to go out and get this low cost, long-term capital you need to go out and securitize it. You need to go out and securitize these loans, but in order to do that, you need a pool of loans. And so we built up the first real pool of CPACE assets, figured out how to underwrite them, and then sold that pool. And so when we spun out, we kind of had an idea of what the standards needed to look like. And when we did the first securitization of the private company in 2017, that was really important because it set the rules of the road for how the industry thinks about the standardization of credit for CPAs in the commercial real estate industry. So that's kind of the history of where we are today. Since 2017, there have been about a dozen securitizations, mostly on the private side. So kind of a false dichotomy, but basically it's placed directly with investors rather than going through an auction process. But the bonds are basically securitized, they're rated, so they can go directly onto large asset managers or insurance companies' balance sheet. There's a liquid market for them. And that means that capital can easily flow to commercial real estate borrowers who want to utilize CPAs as a way to bring their building.
Maybe.
I will say securitization is not the only source of funding for CPACE. We are securitization experts. We're securitizing $3 billion solar portfolio right now. But we are backed by, sorry. There we go. We're backed by Mass Mutual and can park it directly on the insurance company's balance sheet, which I think is more efficient for us. Securitization has a valuable role to play, but there are multiple sources of funding for this kind of investment.
That's right. I think the main point is that in order to place it on any insurance company balance sheet, which is the right home for long dated loans, you need to get a rating. So whether you're going and doing a private securitization or placing it directly on a insurance company balance sheet, you still need that rating. And that was the thing that was very important about securitization.
Really helpful. Maybe Alexandra and Stephen, I'd be curious to know, how much the demand has kind of grown for C-based financing in the last 5 years, and then where do you think it's going, and how much more do you think it will grow, kind of the next decade? Maybe Stephen, start with you, and then
Sure.
Alexandra.
In a self-centered way, I'd say demand is growing enormously and will be doing many billions of dollars a month.
Yeah.
That may not actually happen in my lifetime, but that's what we want. The truth is, we are in a very turbulent environment. Everybody in this room knows that it's a lot harder to get a commercial mortgage today than it was 5 years ago, if I got my COVID dates right. We are gap capital, and I think just the demand for capital overall, as senior lenders become more restrictive, that will drive people to look for capital alternatives, including us. And so we do expect demand to grow dramatically. I think the ESG movement, love it or hate it, is on our side as well, because we can produce data. We're impact investors. We can produce data that shows that we're financing energy efficiency. That's where everybody can love us, because we're backed by data, not just good wishes. We all want cleaner air, better buildings. And I thought the first panel did a great job of showing their leadership in delivering better buildings to our society. We are a capital tool for that. As their demand grows, our demand for capital grows. And we have needs to fill today that didn't exist even a year ago. So I think the outlook for CPACE investment is very, very good. And when I say CPACE, I mean the commercial sector. There is residential PACE in 3 different states, but we're not addressing that here.
I might weigh in as we're equity investors, so our projects would be beneficiaries or users of CPACE financing in certain instances. I do think as a product, it's sort of a common sense product. It's hard to argue with its advantages as sort of a special assessment versus a piece of debt. That said, it's also not always available. Different lenders on the senior side or construction side think about CPACE differently, and that can affect your overall cost of capital, as a entirety on the debt side of things. It's also a fixed rate product. It's not a market rate product in most states. And so we're sort of in a unique period right now as rates are accelerating. CPACE financing is sort of in an arbitrage moment where the more efficient your building, or if your building has kind of an efficient design from the get-go, you're able to get better financing rates because CPACE is better than the market. that was not the case, a year or two ago. So I think, it's an interesting moment for CPACE. As far as I know, CPACE cycles kind of annually, so that may change, but at the moment, it is quite attractive in a lot of buildings, particularly the more efficient the building is. We look at a lot of passive house construction. Passive house benefits from, you can get up to 25% loan to cost CPACE, which is pretty attractive.
Yeah, I would say just to abstract a little bit, there are a lot of push and pull factors facing the commercial real estate industry right now. And, I think to an earlier point, CPACE is a really good product to help commercial building owners meet the demands of their tenants who want cleaner buildings, their investors who are often requiring clean energy measures because their LPs are requiring more ESG investments from them. And then there's also kind of a push factor, right? So we talked about local law 97 in the last panel. That's definitely a market leading regulation across the country, but other cities and states are following suit. And so I think you're going to see a lot more interest, but the challenge, right, with regulations or those demands is you've got to raise capital to install these upgrades, right? You're asking building owners to outlay a lot of upfront capital for likely small operational savings over time. So it's a perfect opportunity for financing. And CPACE is still relatively new, so we'll probably achieve $2 billion of cumulative CPACE originations as an industry this year. That's growing very rapidly. So the vast majority of that has been originated in the past 24 months. So we're still at the kind of, maybe like we're going up the J curve, but we're still at the bottom of the J curve really for this industry. And so I think there's so much more potential, and what will happen as the product continues to scale and institutionalize is that the cost will come down. So to your point, it'll continue to be a much more efficient, it'll continue to become more efficient relative to other sources of capital for buildings that can go green, for buildings that have lenders that will consent. And it's a great tool for equity, especially in a volatile market, because what happens with volatility, you're investing in equity in an underlying piece of real estate. And if your refinancing assumptions go crazy, right? So you're spending a lot more of your free cash flow on debt and you're not able to increase rents the same amount. That means your equity returns are looking worse than you expected. So CPACE allows you to lock in some of that debt cost as well. So it can be really beneficial to equity owners, especially as the market becomes more volatile. And I don't think any of us see reprieve in terms of the capital markets volatility on the debt side. So I expect it to continue to grow and accelerate, especially with the economic conditions.
Great,
I
thank you.
do want to add one more point. I think as commercial mortgage providers start to understand CPACE better, we will be much more widely accepted. There's been a decade of misunderstanding, frankly. But the need for our capital is more acute today. That might open up some minds so that we can make our arguments about the benefits of our financing. We already talked about the fact that we're fixed rate, very long term. That's a natural hedge in the capital structure. And it's not a derivative that you have to go out and buy that you're then stuck with. We are a great capital tool. We're a great capital tool. First panel, those are the people who are really saving our society by building and designing these amazing buildings. We're a capital tool to sort of help them finance what their massive achievements in efficiency and doing great things that we all want. We're a great tool, and commercial mortgage providers will open up to our tool.
I would be curious, Rajeev, since you're a user of the CPACE financing, so you have a different perspective than our other two panelists, what you've learned over time about it, how useful you find it, how many properties you've had where you're actually using it, and anything you'd like to see, as a user of it, right, done differently, or what would, make it even more appealing to you?
Yeah, I mean, there are two projects we've been involved with that incorporate CPACE financing. There's a few others out of the chapters in my career that have included CPACE financing. I do think something Steve talked to, which is really the education on what CPACE is very fragmented. So as a user of the product, if you're going to get a senior loan and the lender sees CPACE as equivalent to mezz financing, that's a very different conversation than someone who sees it as a special assessment for the improvement of the building's long-term viability. Those are two very different perspectives on the product. We would see it in kind of that latter bucket. It's meant to be something that can improve the building, improve its environmental performance, but also improve its overall financial situation. So I do think that can be a challenge. The other is just the process sometimes of going to banks, looking for a unified product where you're looking for a senior loan or construction loan plus CPACE, and not all banks are really geared up to provide that. So you end up getting into kind of a fragmented debt situation. I think, again, that will the burden or the complexity of navigating that is getting a little bit easier. I think the incentive to navigate it is getting stronger just because there's more to do in the buildings, but also the cost of capital is just lower. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it falls to local regional banks who are typically more attractive on a particularly construction financing side, and just their level of comfort with it versus, you know, so they may see it as something different, and then it just ends up not being available, or the burden falls to us to arrange it.
So just to clarify some of what we're talking about, a feature of CPACE is lender consent. So basically, if you think about what we're doing, we're going and we're putting a senior assessment on a piece of real property. The amounts in arrears, so any amount that comes due and annually does come ahead of the mortgage. So in a distressed scenario, you'd have to clear out all the CPACE payments that are due and owing. But unlike a traditional debt product, we wouldn't be able to accelerate our full principal ahead of the mortgage. So it's a little bit of a hybrid. Most states will require that the lender, in their case law, will require that the lender on the property affirmatively sign something saying they understand that CPACE is going on the property. And that's called lender consent. As an industry, we've all agreed to do that no matter what the state says. So we think that's important to the viability and kind of long-term institutionalization of the product. So when we're talking about the role of the lender, it's really important because they actually have the power of the pen on any CPACE deal. What's been really interesting, to your point, in the past really 6 months, because we've institutionalized the product on the investor side, those same investors are also investing in CMBS bonds as well. And they're saying, well, like, okay, I'm investing in a CPACE asset over here, but like saying no to it over here, that doesn't make any sense. And so there's been a huge push from kind of the major CMBS lenders and you know, not just regional banks, to try to figure out how to standardize CPACE consent. It's still early stages, but again, it's just one of the steps to institutionalizing the product both on the borrower side. So going after much larger buildings that typically have very efficient cost of capital as we bring down our cost of capital, but also on the investor side as well.
Great. Stephen, maybe you could talk about what some of the misconceptions are around CPACE financing.
I think first of all, the misconceptions are, in my opinion, are at the commercial mortgage provider level. That is the real barrier to our growth. And by the way, the barrier to better financing for all the commercial buildings that our first panel talked about. The typical thing, and they've been told this by some lawyers for a decade, which is sort of like fingernails on a chalkboard. Is that CPACE primes the mortgage. So I was a banker for a long time and a pretty senior credit officer, and somebody said, oh, we're going to let this other capital in, don't worry, it's all senior to you. I would say, no, thank you. I'm not even going to begin to explain to my regulator why somebody is senior to me in my senior mortgage. That is a non-starter. You will lose your job pretty quickly if you say yes to that, unless you understand it. You understand it to say only the current tax payment is senior to you because it doesn't accelerate. Sewer district is senior to the commercial mortgage. Nobody complains about sewer districts. We are an energy efficiency district. That's what we do for a living. We are public-private partnerships. that allow our private capital to partner with local tax authorities in the form of a property tax called a special assessment, so that we're not taking all the risk of a commercial mortgage provider. We're not analyzing the rent rolls. We're not doing this. So when somebody says to a chief credit officer of a mortgage provider, those guys are senior to you, it doesn't do anybody a service because it misstates how much is senior. And the second thing is we are unsecured because we're taxes. We don't need collateral. All the financing, 20 to 30% of the capital structure that we provide, all that collateral goes as extra collateral to the senior mortgage. People are senior credit officers of commercial banks in today's environment are opening up to listen to those arguments as opposed to the old arguments saying, oh, well, their taxes, they're senior to you, don't let them in. All taxes are senior to debt. We are the kind of taxes that everybody loves because we're voluntary. We have data to support exactly what we're financing. We are part of the solution. We will get that message across to the commercial bank providers, to the commercial mortgage providers.
I think it's maturing a little bit too, where I've been involved with projects where there's a renovation and there happens to be an opportunity to attain C-PACE financing, and C-PACE happens to be more attractive than other types of debt you might take on to do that. It's a little bit different when you're talking about sort of a major part of a construction capital stack, where you can a little bit appreciate from a construction lender's perspective saying, okay, permanent debt is going to take this out and someone's going to be taken out potentially before me, or this, withstands through the property through a stabilization period. So that's a little bit kind of a nuance perhaps to it, where the sheer magnitude of what you can do with C-PACE now, I think is a little bit different maybe than it had been, which was more of a renovation and improvement versus a new product development, and C-PACE being a big part of that. So I think that also plays into it, where it's a bit of a cycle on the evolution, where as the product gets more ground, as it becomes more attractive for larger projects, it also then looms much larger on the, on the balance sheet.
Alexandra, any misconceptions you talk about?
I think you touched on it a little bit, which is historically C-PACE has been more of a niche form of capital. It's been a little more expensive than, a traditional mortgage. If you can kind of fill out your capital stack with a mortgage or another traditional form of capital, it doesn't make sense to go after C-PACE, but that's actually shifted very dramatically because most of the major C-PACE lenders, you raise money from insurance companies, asset managers with kind of long dated appetite for capital, so they're less susceptible to kind of near-term swings of like the near-term volatility we've all seen. And so that means that our capital has kind of shifted to become a lot more attractive from a cost perspective for borrowers. And so I think that misconception has gone away very dramatically, that it's a more expensive niche form. It's becoming a much more core piece of the capital stack for so.
Yeah, I just added to that and said that we're seeing more now developers in their projects think about the project from origination with the idea that it's going to pursue C-PACE financing versus there's an idea to improve the building's efficiency. What are our capital options for that? Oh, C-PACE is an option. It's sort of a kind of an end conclusion. It's a financing solution versus actual projects and designs in pursuit of C-PACE financing. That's a different thing that I think is growing more and more.
The traditional options for mezz and subordinated debt. If somebody says we're expensive, they're comparing us to the senior mortgage.
Yeah.
And we're slightly more expensive than the senior mortgage. That's generally true. We are half the price of the alternative capital, which is subordinated and mezz debt. We're half the price.
Thank you. How many, I guess that's an interesting statement. How many, I guess people who are looking to get the financing actually know that? I mean, they would know it if they go out and shop it, but is it like widely known? Like if you're not super familiar with C-PACE, right? I'm like, okay, I'm sort of thinking about it. I'm a property owner. I don't know much about it. Would they actually, that's not widely known, that the cost differential between the senior CPACE versus MES? It's not widely known.
No, I would say just because it's so recent, well, to back way back, when we started Greenworks, one of the things we invested in was that we invested really heavily in the marketing and origination team because there was so much education that had to happen on the lending side, building owners, or lender side, building owner side, investor side. That's become a lot easier. And I think a lot of it does have to do with the fact that the market has increased dramatically in the past 36 months. So more PACE programs have come online. Most major MSAs have it. And once a PACE program comes online, there's a huge kind of push to educate the market in that local jurisdiction. And that's coming from lenders like us. It's also coming from the public sector as well. So it's become much more known in the commercial real estate industry, but just with recent volatility, I think there's still the misconception that PACE is more expensive, but as you start to see these large deals happening, I think it'll become a lot clearer that it's just a much more institutional piece of the capital stack.
I guess on that note, Alexandra, this question for you, and we pass it around, but how do CPACE lenders such as yourself assess kind of the credit risk for the below investment grade rated tenants? Walk us through that.
Yeah, great question. So it's a really interesting product. If you think about what we're doing again, we're lending to property. We're not actually lending like that. The underlying owner is going to come and go, right? So if we're on the property for 20 or 30 years, there's likely going to be 4 or 5, 6 owners on that property. And so what we're really looking for is the long-term viability of that location in that property. It's a little different than underwriting a mortgage or even underwriting equity in a property. So we look first and foremost at what we call LTV. So that's our total PACE exposure to the underlying property value. And then we'll also look for what could go wrong, right? Like what could go wrong to that underlying value such that, you know, our average LTV is about 20%. So such that the property decreases in value by 80%. If it decreases the value by 80%, no one's going to want to come up, step into the shoes of the owner and pay taxes and PACE, right? So what we look for there is a couple. One is location. So we'll screen for really rural, so locations that if that operator can't operate the property, no one else is likely to come in. So things that are very far from population centers, things that have significant environmental liability, such that if someone comes in, it's going to be very expensive for them to clean up or manage regulations. We screen out very specialized use property types. And I always get the question, like, what does that mean? How can we standardize it? Very hard to generalize, but think about like the one that always comes to mind that came across my desk was a glass manufacturer, right? Like you take one look at that manufacturing plant and you're like, nothing else could ever go here without a ton of investment to change it into something else. We've also gotten like requests for roller coasters, like that is very special use, you know. So we would screen those out as well. And so that's kind of what we're looking for. We're really looking to understand how viable is this property for the long term. Are we taking significant operator risk? PACE is not set up to take significant operator risk. And then someone on the panel mentioned earlier that this is becoming much more of a new construction, new development product. And so that is another set of underwriting that we look at as well, because we want to make sure that the value actually is achieved, right? So there's risk to achieving that value in the first place. And so that's, we'll look at the parties on the property. So is the developer experienced? Who's the senior lender? If the developer doesn't make it work, then the senior lender step in and take over the property, take over the project and complete it. Who's the GC? Are they going to be able to complete the project? And then we'll also look for, of course, owner equity, kind of standard new construction underwriting. And then importantly, we'll want to make sure that our PACE funds are going in as eligible measures are being installed and value is accruing on the property. So typically we'll go in alongside other sources of funds just to make sure that the value is accruing as our exposure is increasing.
Even anything to add there and how you analyze?
I think the commercial mortgage providers have the hard job because they're trying to really analyze credit in every aspect, you know, and take the property as collateral and then be able to act and foreclose on that property if that borrower doesn't pay them back. We do not interfere with any commercial lenders' foreclosure rights. We don't interfere with any debt providers' rights per se. And so That's one point. Basically, our concern is that somebody will be willing to pay property taxes, which is us. Somebody going to be willing to pay property taxes. So yes, you look at what is the potential alternative use for this property. We have, I'm sure you have as well, turned down projects that look really good until you realize they're in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And if that tenant leaves, it's farmland. You won't be able to fill that property, that building at all. So all we're trying to, and we avoid environmental risk like the plague. Because that's one thing that will cause people to not pay property taxes. We've all passed gas stations on a corner in town that have been sitting there for 50 years, empty and dilapidated, and nobody can understand why. That's because it costs $10 million to dig up that tank that's leaking and fix it. So we're just looking for alternative use to make sure that somebody will pay property taxes, because we're playing a very long 20 to 30-year game.
I think something I'd add to that as a consumer of CPACE, and to twist it a little bit. So our firm and our investment strategy, although we focus a lot on sustainability and improving the environmental performance of the asset, is really driven by climate risk. And what are the financial implications of the climate risk you're taking? And I think something to consider in CPACE is that it is a special assessment. There are many locations where we think the tax situation over 10, 20-year periods of time is somewhat unsustainable from a climate perspective. And as a result, you do have to take that into account, I think, when you look at something, whether you're doing traditional debt or you're adding a special assessment, who's going to come ahead of you? What's your obligation that's going to increase in order to remain viable in locations of climate risk where, you know, the current tax situation is probably unsustainable?
Yes, Rajeev, on that point, what, you know, as an investor in these properties, how do you screen for climate risk? What do you think about? You know, just kind of walk us through sort of your framework and analysis.
Yeah, sure. So we think about investing in locations of low climate risk. What does that mean? You know, it's a fairly settled science on locations that are going to experience greater effects due to everything we know about climate change, right? That ranges from sea level rise to water stress, heat stress, and extreme storm, obviously, and other things like that. The other thing we look at is readiness. What is a community, a location, a metro area's capacity to handle what is kind of going to occur in an era of climate change? And we blend those two things to assess both markets, submarkets, and specific sort of latitude and longitudes in order to come to a conclusion on what are the locations that are both inherently able to thrive in a changing climate, but also reflect the kind of economic demographic conditions any real estate investor would look at. And I think something we always try and convey is when we're looking at climate risk, we're talking about financial risk. We're talking about capital at risk. We're talking about risk adjusted return. It's no different. It's just that when we look at an asset and we think about climate risk, what we see are financial risks in terms of lending criteria. We look a lot at insurance premiums, and we look at tax. And those three burdens, which we as a real estate industry are really takers on, particularly on the equity side. We're takers of lending criteria. We really can't do much to adjust that. We're takers of insurance, and we're takers of tax. If those three levers get pulled against our direction, you can lose your money. So that's really kind of a quick way of how we think about it. And it's obviously something, you know, we're seeing every day.
Yes, Rajeev, on that point, when you think about timeframes, right, the time horizon on what little I know, can be long, right? I mean, it can be 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so how are you taking just sort of the time frame component into account?
Yeah, so when you think about climate change, your mind immediately goes to sort of, this is a problem for 2050, this is a problem for 2040. And yeah, that is true in some instances. It's also clearly not true in others where you see hurricanes getting stronger year after year after year. You're seeing the amount of disaster, cost of disasters, you know, only going in one direction in this country. As an investor, why is that a problem? It's a problem because the assets that are exposed are going to be subject to different unexpected and likely accelerating costs, whether as real estate investors, OpEx and CapEx experiences that you didn't expect, insurance premiums rising out of control, tax situations changing, and then ultimately demand shift, right? So tenants, supply chains, consumers, population centers shifting, and that's a longer term thing that doesn't happen. The other really key factor is liquidity. If you own an asset in Florida and you intended it to sell it this year, you're in trouble. There's going to be fewer buyers for your property. That's a case that cycles in and out. But we also think that's becoming more of a part of new buyers' calculus. And as they're taking into account, they're thinking, okay, 10 years from now, when I sell the asset, right, we think on 10-year timelines. If we're buying an asset today, we don't really care about who we're selling it to. We care who they're selling it to 20 years from now. Because when they go to underwrite it and they say, oh, there's a ground discount here. Oh, this is a climate risk exposed place. They're going to apply the discount to offset exit. So although it is in many people's minds very far away, the sort of dominoes of value destruction are quite close. And it's something you see it in insurance premiums, until this past week. The last truly major hurricane to hit a major population center in Florida was 1992. Insurance premiums have still escalated dramatically and far outpaced the rest of the country in Florida. And it's just because insurers are the largest consumers of climate risk data. They don't really care what happened in the past. They're just saying, what's the chance of the big one hitting this week, this month, this year? And it's always increasing. So I think that's where, although the timeline for how a lot of us conceive climate change in our lives and the decisions we make can be very long-term, the financial implications are half.
Thank you. Maybe Alexandra, this question for you and Stephen. The local law, New York's local law 97, how do you think that will impact sort of the demand for C-based financing? Alexandra, you first.
Sure, happy to take it. So I think it'll vastly increase the demand, frankly, for C-based financing in the city. The city actually just released guidelines on Monday, updated guidelines on Monday. So we're hopeful that suggests that the city's ready to kind of have C-based be a tool to help buildings meet the requirements of local law 97. So for those of you, I'm sure you all know what it is, but basically it requires buildings over 25,000 square feet to have massive reductions in their carbon emissions, up to 80% by it's 2040, 2030. And if you think about who that impacts such a wide range of commercial real estate here in the city, like my co-op, right? So it's like a 25 unit co-op building, right? We're going to be affected, right? Because we're over 25,000 square feet. And if you think about what the options of most buildings are, it's going to be to assess their owners. So do a capital raise either from tenants or shareholders, which is never attractive, or go out and get financing. These are massive upgrades that need to happen in most cases. And so, again, CPACE is a great tool. It's probably not going to be the only tool, right? There will probably be other lending options that crop up. But I think it'll be really an important one for buildings to meet the requirements because the fines are going to be very steep, especially for inefficient buildings.
Stephen?
I think I'm also a resident of New York, and I'm a little frustrated because New York, my city, has been very quick with the stick and very slow with the carrot. There is absolutely no reason, in my opinion, that we shouldn't be providing billions and billions of dollars of capital investment to help what the first panel was describing as the greening up of New York in response to the local law. I agree with the goals of the local law. The unintended consequences of that law will be very serious. We are presenting a potential solution. We have private capital to partner with the local tax authorities in order to help achieve these goals. It does not exist in New York. It does not. And it's very, very frustrating because we do business all over the United States and I can't do it where I live. So I'm frustrated. I encourage the city officials to accelerate their third, fourth, or 10th review of CPACE. I cannot explain why CPACE exists all across the United States, except in New York City. It does exist in New York State. We close deals in Long Island, but I can't do it in the 5 boroughs of New York City, where no doubt needed the most. So I encourage our public officials to have an ear to the solution to these property holders who are about to get fined, pass it on to their tenants, and I don't know. Passing around costs can be alleviated by, here's a solution. Here's capital that's long-term capital to support that. So those same goals, they should open up New York to CPACE.
You think it'll happen?
Eventually, since the rest of the United States will be using it and is using it, the answer is yes. And there are other states in Philadelphia has its own program. Other cities have their own program. I don't know how many programs exist in Los Angeles, maybe 6. Okay, 3. There's 6 in California, maybe 3 in Los Angeles. New York will figure it out. I just wish it was sooner rather than later, because local law 97 is hanging over the head of everyone who lives in New York City.
What's been the impediment? I mean, if almost everyone else is caught on, why do you want to stay lagging?
I would almost ask a property owner in the audience instead of me, because we're capital providers, but we're not politicians. Like, that's a political question to me, and I can't answer that.
Great.
Maybe somebody else can.
Maybe just to wrap it up, we'll take some Q&A as well. But I guess one last question, maybe Rajeev, this one's probably for you. Advice to someone who is sort of, you know, they're an investor just like you are. They're thinking about CPACE financing. They don't know much about it. They're certainly not as knowledgeable as you are. They've never done it. You know, what questions should they ask? What should they be aware of? And walk us through that.
Yeah, good question. We have found, so I think internally, if you think CPACE may be a part of your projects or part of your plans, starting early with that conversation around where could CPACE fit in, what is eligible in your state for CPACE financing, and finding people and the consultants and advisors who really know that. I think that's important because it helps you then go to your lending partners and actually have sort of a solution for them and a conversation around what it is actually doing for the building. As far as I can understand, and we obviously don't invest in every state, but a lot of you know better, you know, state to state resources differ in terms of how they're encouraging these programs. And I think a lot of states actually offer quite a bit of help in terms of education and resources on how to navigate the CPACE process. So I think depending on where you are, it can be different. It sounds like Perk City's not that great, but we found in places like Washington State, Massachusetts, California, these are places where you can actually have pretty advanced conversations on CPACE. So yeah, I think it starts with kind of internal education, and you kind of have to take that outside.
Wonderful. Any questions for our panelists? Yes.
So I'm a little confused about the amount you can borrow, because I think somewhere along the line you said 20% loan to value, but is that the value of qualifying aspects that go towards sustainability, or is it 20% of value the way we're used to thinking of an asset value?
So there are kind of two requirements and it's the lesser of. So we'll have an underwriting requirement. Actually, we'll go up to 35% of loan to value. So if you get an appraisal says for $1 million, we can lend up to $350,000. The other cap is what the program will allow. And so each program will have different eligibility for what's eligible for PACE financing. It sounds complicated. It's pretty standardized state to state. The main differences are, you know, some states have different public sector goals. So for instance, in Texas, they may allow water efficiency because they have water efficiency goals and are facing droughts, whereas in California, they might allow wildfire mitigation. So it's kind of on the margin, but most states generally allow energy efficiency above code and clean energy installations on the property, which encompasses a very wide range of measures typically within a new construction. So we're usually maxing out our own internal LTV cap before we're maxing out on the eligible measures for new construction.
Then I agree completely with what she just said. Energy efficiency of a new building compared to an old building is so dramatic. Just financing new buildings achieves the public goal of cleaner air through energy efficient or cleaner environment through energy efficiency. And so the variability state to state, you know, frankly, I don't know that Texas would ever follow exactly what California does. Just don't. So there are differences in eligibility by location, by program. The states pass the laws, there's a program to implement those laws. We have to comply with those restrictions in each location that we are investing in. And we're happy to do so, but it's basically 20 to 30% of the entire capital stack. And our engineers have no problem in pointing out exactly which features are energy efficient, whether it's roofs, lighting, windows, the outer core, every switch you see, it all qualifies. So we're not limited by normally at least on ground up, or we're not limited by trying to find enough green stuff. We're really limited in other ways locally by what they call eligible for finance.
Good questions.
Hi, my name's Nick. I'm a counselor of real estate. Just to expand on the question of on valuation side, coming into a project, if you're maxed out at say 30% of value and appraisal, which is based on the lower tax model, assuming you come in the new valuation with the new tax model is going to be lower, perhaps substantially, I don't know, but 30% is a big chunk of a value. And so I assume the tax, maybe you can give us some examples, does the tax increase by 50%, 100%, 1,000, 10,000? How many times, what order of magnitude increase is a property owner going to face from that tax side? And how do you educate these valuation models, or how does that come into play when the value is immediately lower if you're involved in the tax increases substantially? Right.
We are not setting tax rates. There are ad valorem taxes, which are the way communities compete from a cost perspective for building anything. We are special assessments, so specific taxes for specific benefits for specific properties with specific interest rates and specific repayment schedules. When we close a deal, we are absolutely in compliance on day one. I don't know that we're going to be in quote compliance for a new closing 10 years later. Things will change, valuations will change. There are no takebacks in what we do. When we file our assessment, it's not undone by a bankruptcy even.
Right, so the box, the expense box is property tax. And that, if you come in, that goes up a lot. And so the valuation would be impacted directly. I'm sorry, the box for the expense is the property tax box.
Yep.
And so the valuation,
which is
based on the cash flow after the property tax expense, is going to be a different analysis. What if you're involved versus if you're not involved?
well,
So the value is directly impacted.
True, but your overall cost of capital may not shift dramatically because let's say you take on, let's say the project you bear 60% LTV and you take on 20%, your overall construction and permanent loan is also going to reduce. potential, particularly for new construction.
So
So,
said value changes immediately if you're involved versus if you're not involved. From that property tax expense.
Yeah, so typically, I think what Rajeev was saying is that it's just a different line item, like it comes out in a different place in the pro forma, right? We're still financing the same thing, you're gonna have to raise debt to do it no matter what. And so it's just coming out of a different line. I hear you, and typically what we do is we'll get an as-complete appraisal, right? That will factor in the financing and the capital stack, but from our perspective, right, the collateral is the same, the collateral isn't changing. And so, right, like it's just where the cash flow is coming out on the pro forma. So from our perspective, it's the same piece of collateral that we're underwriting. The lender or the owner may decide to order an updated appraisal with CPACE there. And typically what we see is because CPACE is financing operating cost savings measures, it tends to be neutral. But it's that is kind of up to the lender and
A different asset than if.
we're enabling a more efficient, right? Like, so if you think about what CPACE is, we're ring fencing funds that can't be value engineered out for energy efficiency or renewable energy measures that will save operating expenses on the property long term. And so a lot of times, and not in all cases, but a lot of times that's actually neutral or accretive to the value of the property from a baseline.
So it's a different asset.
It's a more efficient asset.
So this is for Rajeev, question specifically in conjunction with what was just asked, but like, do you see a net operating income increase, and does that increase property value overall?
yeah, I think something I was actually just gonna add, we haven't seen a discount from using CPACE. So in the sense that I think underwriting, when looking at CPACE, let's say in an exit scenario or in an appraisal scenario, we haven't seen it really change the value, except that it is kind of part of the capital stack and a line item set. Typically, depending on what you do, I mean, I think it comes to, there are a number of uses for CPACE, right? And depending on what you do, different things have different OpEx impacts. So if you're, going full electric and also adding solar and just bringing down utility costs dramatically, yeah, that may have an impact on your OpEx. You may be adding resilience that brings down your insurance premium. These kinds of things can have impacts for sure. I think it really depends on what you're doing. In many instances, I think when people are, or projects are maybe getting to code, or they are building to code, they may not see huge alpha based on the use of CPACE. But I think if you're deploying it, it's really in terms of what you're deploying it towards. There are things that have good ROI, there are things that have less good ROI. And that just really depends on type of building, where you're building.
What are minimums? Minimums, yeah, and what are minimum loans that you're, you said, I think you said 350,000 was your.
Yeah, so we have done loans as small as, a couple $100,000, but our minimum is about $2 million just from an efficiency perspective. And our average loan size is about, it fluctuates between 10 and 15 million.
Our minimum is also around $3 million. We have the same average loan size. The largest individual commitment we've made is $300 million to one project, massive project. But in general, it's 10 to 15 million today. I think as the demand for our capital goes up, the average size of our deals will go up. It won't take much because we haven't penetrated much of the commercial real estate finance market yet, because people simply don't know about this.
Thank you.
So basically, we say if the value of is this going to be used for new development or just existing one? That's the first question. The other one is, if you guys go in lending up to 30% or $10 to $15 million, and I have a project that I'm going to bid $45 million, what am I going to get the rest? Am I going back to the regular mortgage lender, commercial, or you guys can go up to that number?
There's pretty much 3 points in the real estate that CPACE can come in on. First of all, we can be lead capital. We can be the first capital committed to a new build construction. We also can come in the middle of construction, especially when there's cost overruns and the owner doesn't want to put in more capital. The mortgage provider is not going to put in more capital. That is generally referred to as rescue capital in our industry. We love that. We love it. That we're a perfect solution to that. And then finally, in some places, 2 to 3 years after the certificate of occupancy, we can still come in, which allows that owner to recycle some of the capital to new projects. And it also allows the mortgage provider to maybe bolster some of the interest reserves and things like that. So we can come in at any point in those cycles. And then much later, if we're financing the greening up of an older building, we can finance their CapEx budget, which might be accelerated because of our capital, which we hope and believe it does.
So I still should go to the regular mortgage lender before even on.
We don't cannibalize regular mortgages. That's your cheapest capital as a rule.
I won't be able to get the money that I need.
We do cannibalize subordinated debt and mezzanine. I wouldn't want to market mezzanine against our capital because we'll win every time.
We have a question from the dial-in audience. I'm not sure who this question is actually for, right? Perhaps all three of you. Are you seeing a gap in the tech software side, automating and generating data on green building updates? So you can actually like measure how kind of green a building is becoming.
I mean, what I said, there's a gap. That may not be a fair characterization. I mean, I think it is, there are plenty of technologies out there to assess your building's energy performance or utility use performance. I think adopting those, determining why you're adopting them, particularly for large portfolios or companies that have assets across multiple markets, why you're putting these things in is kind of your first question. And I think a lot of firms, particularly on the institutional side, are answering that question now. And the reason they're doing it is because they need to tell their investors, why they're doing it, or how their buildings are performing and start benchmarking themselves. So I think that I wouldn't say the technology is not out there. It's pretty widely available. It works pretty well. There's a lot of startups in the clean tech space pursuing this area. It's more, why does it get implemented? Is the cost and is it worth it? That's a different thing.
We're going to have to wrap. We're at time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Melissa, Alexandra, Rajeev, and Cedar, for a fascinating discussion. I want to thank all of you, whether you're here in person or whether you're here attending virtually. We appreciate your support. We hope you enjoyed our rich by the content. And please stay tuned for future events. On December 2nd, we have another session on solving the affordable housing crisis. Thanks again. And please.